Hi everyone, thank you for clicking and welcome to an analysis for the women's Ironman 70.3 World Championships race in St George. The field was incredibly deep, featuring a number of athletes with the potential and expectation to win. Lucy Charles-Barclay and Taylor Knibb would start the day as many people's picks after dominant Collins Cup wins. Daniela Ryf would be looking to add to her 5 world titles at this distance and make amends for an uncharacteristic performance in the Collins Cup. A whole host of contenders would be on the heels of these three: Emma Pallant-Brown, Holly Lawrence, Ellie Salthouse, Jeannie Metzler, Kat Matthews and Jackie Herring, to name a few, with the ability to challenge for the win and the podium. Lucy Charles immediately established herself at the front, which was no surprise to see at all. In the Collins Cup, we did see Katie Safiras manage to stick with Charles for the whole swim, so I was very keen to see if Knibb would be capable of this too. However, by 3 minutes in, Charles had opened up a gap of clear water behind her. You can just see glimpses of Knibb's lime green hat leading a strung out line behind, but she was unable to latch onto Charles's feet. Halfway through the swim, Charles had put 40 seconds of clear water between herself and a group of 5 containing Knibb, Lawrence, Metzler, Oliveira and Lamolo. Looking at the time splits, the fast pace set by Charles and the attempts of the rest to follow appeared to cause quite a few fractures and little groups. Salthouse and Ryf were next in the water, swimming 1:10 down on Charles, with Pallant, Matthews and Herring a further 10 to 20 seconds back. I also saw a lot of comments in the live feed on the lead kayak, giving Charles a bit of a draft. I've never let out a swim before, and the only kayaks I've encountered in a triathlon are the safety ones, making sure I don't drown. So if anyone who can actually swim is watching, it'd be interesting to know your thoughts on whether this makes a sizable difference. By the end of the swim, the groups and positions had remained fairly constant, but the time gaps had grown. Charles now had a 1:30 gap, definitely enough to make a decent go of a solo bike effort. Salthouse and Ryf were 2:30 down and had almost been joined by Jackie Herring, who had a strong second half of the swim and moved ahead of Pallant and Matthews, who came out of the water 3:30 back with Sky Monch. Some sizable time gaps over the first 25 minutes of racing, however, with Knibb in Chase Pack 1 and Ryf in Chase Pack 2, they're definitely not insurmountable. 12k into the bike, and Knibb had dropped her group, putting 50 seconds into Lawrence and Metzler, as had Ryf, who was now 35 seconds clear of Salthouse. However, whilst these two were putting time into the rest, the gap to Charles out front was holding steady, and at the next time check at 20 kilometres in, Knibb had actually gone backwards relative to Charles, 1:45 down, perhaps suffering on the faster slight downhill section of the course. You'll have noticed that Knibb is still on the road bike we saw in the Collins Cup. I don't think the bike itself will have been much of a disadvantage, but her position certainly will have been. Ryf's gap to Charles had remained the same at 2:30, with Oliveira, Lawrence, Metzler and Lamolo just starting to let Ryf slip away. The fractures opened in the swim had carried over to the bike, and the field was rather scattered at this point. Salthouse losing more time at 3:40 back, Pallant at 4 minutes, Herring at 4:20 and Matthews at 4:45. The 20 to 40 kilometre mark, though, is where Lucy Charles really starts to take a hold of this race, continuing to put more time into Knibb and crucially Ryf, who until this point has matched Charles's speed. You can see Ryf in the background closing in on Knibb around 3 minutes back at this point. Behind, Lawrence and Oliveira had gotten rid of Metzler, who had now slotted in with Pallant and Salthouse. There is always speculation with Ryf about if she is going to time it and reach the front late in the bike, as we have seen her surge in the late stages of the Kona bike course before. However, at the risk of sounding like someone with no imagination, generally in these races, if Knibb or Ryf were able to match Charles, they would, or would at least be holding the gap or cutting into her lead. Instead, though, they continue to lose time over the middle kilometres of the bike course. In fact, after her effort to catch Knibb, Ryf begins to fall back as the road turns upwards for the main Snow Canyon climb. By the time they reach the top, Charles has 3:20 to Knibb and a huge 6:15 to Ryf, who is now in danger of being swallowed up by the chasing pack behind that has finally settled together, containing Lawrence, Salthouse, Pallant, Metzler, Monch and Matthews, 7 to 7:30 back on Charles. Jackie Herring cracks up the climb and loses 2 minutes to this pack. On the downhill into T2, Charles continues to push and again benefits from her aero position and setup, and by the time she reaches T2, she again has extended her lead to 5 minutes to Knibb. We've seen a couple of dodgy transitions from Charles in recent races, however, she's very composed through T2 and it should now just be a case of keeping it steady and comfortable. As Knibb leaves T2, we can see Ryf enter, and a moment later we also see that pack of 6 whiz past. The race for the podium is still very much on. Ryf pretty much immediately falls off the pace over the first 2.5k, running the slowest pace of the top 7. She is swallowed up and then spat out of the next group behind and would eventually drop out of the top 10, finishing 11th overall. Out front, Charles continues to extend her gap and outran Knibb by 50 seconds over the first 6k. Behind Nib for the first time all race, the order finally starts to settle a bit. Metzler, whose fluid form suggests she is running very well, establishes herself in third early on, distancing Matthews and Pallant up the first rise. Over the next 8k, Charles pulls ahead even further, and if her win wasn't secured already, it definitely is now. Charles actually rounded off her performance with a 1:18 run, the fastest of the day, and takes her first World Championship title in dominant fashion. It's not easy being out there on your own all day, knowing there's a strong group of athletes chasing you down, so props to her. Behind, Nib is starting to look vulnerable to a charging Metzler, who's clawing back 10 to 15 seconds every kilometre. The feed cut to Charles taking the tape, and when we return we see that Metzler has overtaken Nib up a steep climb. In the interview afterwards, I think Nib actually mentioned that she was passed when she stopped to go to the bathroom. Nib does not go away easily though, but Metzler maintains her silky smooth running form to come home in second, with Nib third. Matthews, Pallant, Monch, Herring and Lawrence take 4th to 8th, whilst Bartlett and Reichmann, who have both been there or thereabouts all day, put together consistent and well-measured races to take 9th and 10th. Thank you very much for watching, and also a huge thank you to those of you who have subscribed so far. There have been a load of nice comments from people who I see popping up regularly on my videos, so thank you very much for the support, it really is appreciated. If you enjoyed the video and you're not subscribed, please be sure to click the button for more triathlon content.